The hum of the warships was almost deafening, but the commander remained still, his eyes fixed on the vast emptiness of space. The fleet had been in motion for hours now, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every officer on board knew what was at stake. The orders were clear: destroy Earth before they could strike first. That was the plan. It had to be. A burst of static came through the comms, and the commander's heart skipped. It was a transmission, but there was no voice. Only a pattern, repeating over and over. The hum of the fleet was drowned out by the strange, almost haunting rhythm that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of space. "They're not responding," the comms officer muttered, her voice tight. "No sign of resistance, no sign of life." The commander's gaze hardened. "Don't mistake their silence for weakness. They're waiting for us." He turned to the fleet strategist, a sharp-eyed officer who had never once questioned orders. "What's the status of our weapons?" "Everything's ready, sir," the strategist replied. "All systems are in place. The moment we reach Earth's orbit, we strike." The commander nodded. The tension on the bridge was palpable. He could feel the weight of every officer's expectation pressing down on him. They had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it, analyzing every possible outcome. It was supposed to be simple. Earth was a primitive species. They had no defenses, no hope of fending off a fleet of their size and power. Yet even now, a gnawing doubt lingered at the back of the commander's mind. Something didn't feel right. It was more than just the eerie silence from Earth. Something deeper, something wrong. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. This was no time for hesitation. Earth would fall. It had to. "Sir," the first officer spoke up, his voice tinged with urgency. "We've detected something. It's small, but it's there. A signal." The commander's chest tightened. "A signal from Earth?" "No, sir. It's from the edge of their system," the officer replied. "It's too faint to be detected normally, but we're picking it up." The commander's brow furrowed. "What kind of signal?" "It's complex," the officer said, hands flying across the console. "Not something we've ever seen before." For a moment the commander's mind raced, torn between curiosity and the need to act. Could this be the beginning of their end? Was Earth already preparing to strike, or was this something else entirely? "Get me a direct line to every ship in the fleet," the commander ordered, his voice firm. "We're not going in blind. Prepare for contingencies. All ships on high alert." The tension escalated as the orders were relayed, the crew moving with practiced precision. The commander stood at the front of the bridge, watching as the fleet continued its approach toward Earth's orbit. Each second felt like an eternity, and as they drew closer, he could almost feel it, the pulse of something beneath the surface, something waiting to break free. "Ready to fire," the strategist said quietly, glancing at the commander. "On your command, sir." The commander opened his mouth to give the order, but just then everything stopped. The comms officer's voice came through, shaky but insistent. "Sir, the signal, it's changing. No, it's not a signal anymore." The commander's heart skipped. "What do you mean, not a signal?" The officer's voice wavered. "It's too much, sir. We can't process it. It's flooding the system." Suddenly the screens on the bridge flashed to life, each one pulsing with a surge of energy. So powerful, it knocked every officer back in their seats. The air seemed to crackle, and the ship itself shuddered under the weight of whatever force was building outside. And then, without warning, the silence from Earth was shattered. A burst of energy exploded from the planet's surface, and the entire fleet froze. The lights of the warships blinked out, the systems on each ship grinding to a halt. The power that had been gathered to strike Earth was now being sucked into the void. It was as if the planet itself had become a living entity, drawing in all of the fleet's energy and turning it against them. "Deploy emergency power." The commander shouted, but it was already too late. The screens flashed with a terrifying image, Earth not defeated, but suddenly glowing with an intensity that rivaled the sun. It was a force of unimaginable power, something the fleet had never even considered. The commander stumbled back, his breath coming in short gasps. "They've already fired!" The realization hit him like a physical blow. They had thought they were the ones in control. They had planned to strike first, but Earth had been waiting for them to make their move. They had underestimated the humans, and now it was too late. The energy surge shot outward, faster than light, and in the blink of an eye, it reached them. A blinding flash filled the bridge, and the commander's last thought before everything went black was a single, chilling phrase, and that was before Earth even responded. The silence that followed was unlike anything the commander had ever experienced. He had seen battles, destruction, and chaos, but nothing had ever compared to this oppressive stillness. The light from Earth still lingered, an afterimage that burned itself into the minds of the fleet's officers. The hum of the warships had long since died down, replaced by an eerie calm that set their nerves on edge. The screens flickered back to life one by one, and the sounds of creaking metal and distant alarms slowly returned. The commander's mind was racing, still reeling from the energy surge that had crippled their fleet in a matter of seconds. His body felt heavy, as if the weight of what had just happened was pressing down on him from all sides. He had been so sure, so certain that the fleet would overwhelm Earth with ease. Yet now, as he surveyed the damaged warships, it was clear that the tables had turned. "Status report!" the commander barked, his voice hoarse from the shock. One of the officers, still shaken, tapped at his console, eyes wide with disbelief. "Shields are down, sir. Engines damaged. We've lost communication with 4 of the fleet's ships. They're not responding." The commander's gaze swept over the crew, their faces a mix of fear and confusion. They had all believed in their superiority. They had all been confident that Earth, with its primitive technology, would be no match for the Empire's might. But now the truth was staring them in the face. Earth had been ready for them. "Get me a status on all ships, now!" the commander ordered, his voice regaining some of its authority. "We need to know how bad it is." There was a pause as the officers worked, furiously tapping at their consoles, trying to regain control of their ship's systems. The bridge was silent, except for the soft beeps and hisses of the failing machinery. The lights flickered again, casting long shadows on the faces of the crew. The tension in the room was palpable. "We're losing power, sir," the chief engineer reported, his voice tight with stress. "The energy surge from Earth. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's draining everything." "Do we have any backup power?" the commander asked, his tone sharp. The engineer nodded grimly. "We're working on it, but at this rate, it may take hours, maybe even days, to fully recover." The commander clenched his fists. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. But he couldn't afford to let the fear spread. Not now. "We need to regroup," he said, taking a deep breath. "Send a message to the remaining ships. Tell them to prepare for immediate countermeasures. Earth may have the advantage now, but we're not done. Not yet." A moment of silence passed before the officer at the comm station spoke. "Sir, I can't get a signal through. The communication system is overloaded. It's like the energy surge from Earth has locked us out." The commander's eyes narrowed. A strange sense of unease washed over him. Earth's defenses, they're not just primitive, they've advanced in ways we never anticipated. Suddenly the bridge shook and a loud siren began to blare throughout the ship. The commander's heart skipped a beat. The sensation of being caught in the grip of something far larger than them, a force beyond their comprehension, was growing stronger. "Report!" the commander shouted. "Sir, it's a fleet," the officer at the radar station said, his voice trembling. "It's not just Earth, it's an entire fleet, a human fleet." The commander's breath caught in his throat. A human fleet! But before the officer could answer, a massive explosion shook the ship, sending the crew lurching forward. The commander barely managed to keep his footing, grabbing onto the armrest of his seat. The ship groaned in protest, the hull screaming against. The shockwaves that rattled it, what was that? The commander demanded, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's them!" the officer at the radar station gasped. "Their fleet is moving in. It's enormous. They've been hiding it, right under our noses." The commander's mind raced. They had assumed that Earth's defense capabilities were insignificant, outdated, a mere inconvenience. But now, with the revelation of this hidden fleet, everything was changing. "Prepare for battle," the commander ordered, his voice cold and resolute. "We can't let them get the upper hand again." As the crew scrambled to ready the ship's weapons and shields, the commander's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Earth had not only defended itself, they had been preparing for this moment. The humans had known they were coming, and now they were fighting back with everything they had. The fleet's weapon systems hummed to life once more, but the commander's confidence was starting to waver. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of true fear. They were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted. The officer at the radar station spoke again, his voice strained. "Sir, I'm reading multiple signatures. They're getting closer. The human fleet, it's on a direct course toward us." "Shields up," the commander barked, gripping the edge of his console. "Prepare for impact." He turned to the strategist, who had been working frantically at a nearby console. "What's our best option?" "We need to fall back, sir," the strategist said, voice tense. "We're outmatched. Even if we can get our shields back online, their fleet is too large. If we engage them now, we'll be destroyed." The commander's mind raced, his options narrowing by the second. Fall back, surrender. It was anathema to everything he had been taught. They were the Empire. They didn't retreat. But facing an entire fleet, hidden, powerful, and organized, was a different kind of threat. "What if we don't fall back?" the commander asked, his voice dark. "What if we hit them first?" The strategist hesitated. "It's a gamble." "Sir, but we might just have a chance. If we surprise them, we could—" The commander nodded slowly. "Get it done." The crew worked with frantic energy, the air thick with the intensity of the moment. The commander stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the viewport. Earth's fleet was closing in fast, and they had no more time to hesitate. This was it, the final moment, and just as the enemy fleet entered firing range, the commander gave the order, "Fire everything." The ship shuddered as every weapon system on board unleashed a torrent of energy at the approaching fleet. But as the light from their weapons cut through the darkness of space, the commander realized one terrifying truth. They had planned to strike first, but Earth had already fired. The blast rocked the ship, the deafening sound of weapons fire reverberating through the hull. The commander's heart pounded in his chest as the first volley of energy shot toward the human fleet. The air was thick with anticipation, the bridge filled with the shrill whine of sirens and flashing red lights. This was it, the moment they would either prove their superiority or pay the price for underestimating their opponent. "Shields are holding," the officer at the weapons station shouted, his voice strained. "Direct hits, minimal damage. They've got defense systems up, but they're retaliating." The commander didn't flinch, his eyes locked on the viewport. The vast expanse of space before them had suddenly turned into a battleground, filled with streaks of light and explosions. Earth's fleet was massive, far larger than they had initially anticipated, and their ships weren't like anything the commander had seen before. Primitive in design, yes, but efficient, deadly. "We've underestimated them," the commander muttered under his breath. Again, the strategist, standing beside him, didn't reply immediately. Instead, he focused intently on the tactical. "Redoubts. They're using energy shields that react differently from ours. We need to adjust our firing pattern." The commander nodded, his mind racing. Earth had prepared for this, perhaps for years. They hadn't just developed weapons, they had perfected their tactics. The commander's arrogance had blinded him to the reality that Earth was no longer a backwater planet. They were a force to be reckoned with. "Redirect all power to forward cannons," the commander ordered, his voice sharp. "We need to pierce their defenses, engage them at full power." As the fleet's ships adjusted their trajectory, the commander's gaze flickered to the comms officer, whose face was pale and stricken with fear. "Status on the rest of the fleet," the officer swallowed hard before replying. "We've lost contact with 3 of our ships. They're gone. The human fleet's weapons are too powerful. The energy surge earlier, it was only a precursor." The commander felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The energy surge, that unexpected blast from Earth, had not been a fluke. It had been a weapon, a warning, a message. And now, the full force of that message was becoming clear. Earth had not been defenseless. They had been waiting for the right moment to strike back. "Sir," the first officer called out urgently, "they're firing again." The commander's eyes snapped back to the viewport, just in time to see a barrage of energy beams rip through space toward them. The lights on the bridge flickered, the ship groaning in protest as the beams struck their shields, sending shockwaves through the hull. "Shields are down to 30%, the officer shouted. "We can't take much more of this." The commander clenched his jaw. Their once powerful fleet was now scrambling to hold its ground against an adversary that had outmaneuvered them at every turn. The humans were not just defending themselves, they were fighting to survive, fighting to preserve their way of life. "We need to break their lines," the commander said through gritted teeth. "Target their flagship. If we take that down, the rest will fall." His orders were relayed, and the fleet's weapons shifted focus, aiming at the largest ship in the human formation. It was a massive, hulking vessel, its dark hull gleaming against the backdrop of space. But as their weapons fired, something strange happened. "Sir, they're absorbing the blasts," the weapons officer reported, his voice edged with disbelief. "Their flagship is using the energy we're firing to power up its own systems. It's growing stronger." The commander's mind raced. The humans had done something impossible. They had turned their own energy against them, using the power of the fleet's attacks to fuel their counter-offensive. It was a tactic the commander had never seen before, and it was working. The human fleet was adapting faster than they could react. "Redirect all energy to the auxiliary shields," the commander ordered, his voice tinged with frustration. "We need to buy time," but time was running out. The human flagship, now more powerful than ever, fired its own weapons in retaliation. The blast struck their closest warship, disintegrating it in an instant. The explosion was a shockwave of destruction, sending debris scattering through the battlefield. The ship's hull crumpled like paper, torn apart by the sheer force of the blast. "Casualties?" the commander asked, his voice hollow. "We've lost another ship, sir," the officer replied. "And there are multiple breaches across the fleet. We're on the verge of collapse." The commander's chest tightened. His every instinct screamed to pull back, to regroup and rethink their strategy. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when they had come this far. The pride of the Empire was at stake. "Engage at maximum range," the commander ordered. "We'll take them out from a distance. No more close combat." He turned toward the strategist. "What about their flagship?" "It's too powerful to take head-on right now," the strategist replied, eyes narrowed in thought. "We need to disable their engines. If we can immobilize them, the rest of their fleet will follow." "Then that's what we do," the commander said. "Prepare all bombers for a direct strike. If we take out their propulsion system, we'll cripple them." The bombers were launched, their sleek forms cutting through space like knives. The commander watched as they swooped in, releasing their payload of high-powered bombs aimed directly. At the human flagship's engines, the bombs detonated in rapid succession, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. For a brief moment, it seemed like they had succeeded. The flagship shuddered, its engines sputtering as it began to drift. But then, something worse happened. "Sir!" the radar officer shouted. "It's adapting! It's realigning its energy! Systems, the engines, they're coming back online!" The commander's mind raced, but he couldn't find a solution. Earth wasn't just responding. They were evolving faster than their fleet could keep up with. "Prepare for another strike," the commander said, his voice barely audible over the commotion. "If we can't destroy them, we'll make them wish they never fired at us." As the orders were relayed, the commander felt a flicker of dread creep up his spine. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting with a purpose. And this time, it wasn't just about Earth. It was about the galaxy. They planned to strike first, the commander murmured, as his fleet closed in for what could be their final assault. But Earth had already fired. The last of their bombers had just been deployed, but the air on the bridge felt suffocating. The commander stood at the helm, eyes locked on the viewport, every inch of his being bracing for the inevitable. The human fleet's flagship was still, intact, its engines sputtering back to life after their initial strike. The commander's hands clenched, the control console groaning under his grip. This was not how it was supposed to go. Earth wasn't supposed to be capable of this. "Sir, they're realigning their weapons," the first officer said, her voice tight with urgency. "Their flagship is preparing for another barrage." The commander's mind raced. Every calculation he'd made, every assumption about Earth's inferiority had been shattered in mere moments. They weren't just fighting a desperate species, they were fighting an entirely new kind of war. A war in which the humans knew exactly how to use their enemy's own power against them. "We've got seconds," the strategist said, his voice shaking slightly. "If we don't act now..." The words hung in the air like an inescapable truth. The human flagship had recovered too quickly, and their weapons were now fully charged. There was no more time to hesitate. The only choice left was to push forward. "And hope it wasn't too late. Prepare to fire everything we've got," the commander barked. "Target their engines. This time, we make sure they don't get back up." The command was relayed, and the fleet's weapons hummed to life, charging up with an intensity that threatened to shatter the ships. The human flagship loomed large in front of them, its form glowing ominously in the distance. A single shot could decide the entire battle. The thought was like a hammer in the commander's chest. If they failed, there would be no more coming back. This would be the end of the Empire's dominance. The ship's crew waited, tense and silent. No one spoke. Everyone knew what was at stake. The bridge had grown colder, and the commander felt the weight of the entire fleet's hopes resting on his next words. Fire. Energy surged from their warships in a blinding arc, beams of raw power streaking across space toward the heart of the human flagship. The sheer force of the barrage was enough to rattle even the most experienced officers, but the commander didn't flinch. His gaze never wavered from the screen. For a moment, it looked like they had succeeded. The flagship's shields flickered, buckling under the strain of their assault. But then something unexpected happened. The flagship's engines flared brightly, and a second surge of energy blasted outward, redirecting their fire. The human ship had adapted again, this time absorbing their attack and turning it into a counter-offensive. "Shields down," the weapons officer shouted. "We've taken a direct hit." The bridge shook violently as their own blast was turned back against them, the energy lancing through their ship. Sparks flew from the consoles, and the hull groaned under the strain. The commander staggered back, clutching the armrest of his chair to steady himself. "Report!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. "We're still holding, sir, but our systems are failing fast," the officer replied, voice strained with fear. "We've lost all primary systems. The flagship, it's still coming." The commander's vision blurred, but he forced himself to focus. The human fleet had not only repelled their attack, they had turned it into a weapon against them. He had never encountered an adversary so adaptive, so quick to retaliate. It was a mistake to underestimate Earth's ingenuity, and now they were paying the price. "Fall back," the commander muttered, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "Fall back to the outer perimeter. We need to regroup." But before he could issue another command, the bridge was flooded with a new, ominous sound, the hum of an incoming energy pulse. "Incoming!" The radar officer screamed. "Brace for impact!" The bridge lurched again as the pulse struck, a wave of power that swept through the ship, sending it spinning uncontrollably. The lights flickered and went out, leaving them in darkness, save for the eerie glow of emergency alarms. The commander's head slammed against the console as the ship groaned under the onslaught. For a split second, he thought they might have been hit by the final blow, and in that moment a terrible truth settled in his mind. Earth had done it. They had won. The ship shuddered once more, and the lights flickered back on. The viewports displayed the human fleet, their flagship now unmistakably at the center of the formation, glowing with a strange, unyielding light. It was as if Earth's forces had transcended mere warfare. They were now something else, something far beyond anything the commander could understand. Status. The commander gasped, pushing himself upright, his head spinning. We've lost all propulsion, sir," the first officer reported, her voice trembling. "We're dead in space." The ship floated helplessly in the void, surrounded by the remnants of a once proud fleet that now lay shattered and broken. The commander stood speechless, his mind unable to process the scale of their defeat. Earth had fought back with a ferocity that no one had predicted. It wasn't just their technology that had won. It was their will, their survival instinct. The humans had turned the tables in a way no one had ever imagined. "They planned to strike first," the commander whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and despair. But Earth had already fired, and in that moment, as he watched, the human fleet slowly advanced toward them. The commander knew there was no coming back. The Empire had underestimated Earth, and now the cost of that mistake was clear.